Hello, I'm Bill Britton. I'm the Vice President of Information Technology and Director at the Cybersecurity Institute at Cal Poly. I'm kind of here today to talk to you about some of the best practices for small businesses and for yourself as an individual human being in cybersecurity. Hopefully what I'm going to do is demystify a few of the things, make it a little simpler for you to understand, and kind of change your mindset on what we want to do and accomplish in this whole world of cybersecurity and how it affects you. I think the biggest thing that we want to take a look at today is understanding that you should be afraid, but you shouldn't be scared to death. This is something that's affecting really every one of us that touches technology. So if you live on a farm with no technology, don't listen anymore. You don't have to hear anything else. But if you live in the real world, in the big city, if you do your banking online, you buy things online, you sell your commodities online, then you have a challenge. And the key is to move in this conversation with you, to move from this world where we've been told to be a defensive element, a defensive posture, into really taking on the offense and becoming more aware of yourself, aware of the tools that you're using, aware of your actions and behaviors when you're online and what you're doing in line. So with that, we're going to talk about security, cybersecurity awareness. We're going to talk about how to reduce or mitigate some of those threats and problems. And then we'll look at best practices, particularly around remote working, which has become a new norm. And in some cases, even though, thank goodness, COVID is nearly over, we'll still remain remote. And there will still be those that are working from home because, hey, it works. But let's make sure it works to your defense, to your posture, that it takes care of you and protects you in the process of doing that. So the first thing we really want to talk about is the biggest, the baddest email. So if we go back 20 years and we talk about the telephone, and that's the only form of communication that we had when we had that one on a cord in the house. And if the phone rang and you picked it up and you didn't know who it was, what did you do? You hung up. If it was somebody that you talked to and you could tell they were selling you something, what did you do? You hung up. It's kind of interesting, we've forgotten that basic lesson when dealing with a computer. We receive an email, and I guess we're just so overexcited and overjoyed about, I got an email, that you open it up, you start to read it, you see the hot link, and you hit that link without thinking. So in a defensive world, you would look at that email and you would say, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do about that email. In an offensive approach, if you don't know who sent you that email and they don't owe you money, why even open it to begin with? So there's a new approach to this. It's much like junk mail. If you know that that's junk mail with a postage paid mark on it, do you really open it? I mean, seriously, do you open it and read what's in it, knowing that it's just another ad for something you don't want? Well, email is kind of that same thing. Now, email attackers, or let's call them the bad actor in this case. The bad actor has gotten pretty smart. They target entities and they target companies. And so if you're a small business and you're moving cash, they're going to target you. If you're a small business and you have a commodity that is hot and necessary and somebody else might want it at a higher price, they're going to target you. There's also the email that just targets everybody on the email chain that could receive it. So those aren't as pointed, they're not as targeted. And we'll talk a little bit more about the different types of phishing attacks and other ways. You got to remember now that the world we work in, particularly in a small business market, it's about word of mouth, which is advertising and marketing. It's about who you are to that user customer and how you get yourself across to them as quickly as possible so that they feel more confident that your product is exactly what they need. So you have to be a little careful in that, because if you overdo in exposing who you are, talking about yourself, your personal likes, all those things, you are a tremendous target for social attacks. A socialized attack or social engineering is when the targeter, that is the bad actor, will look at your profile and figure out what your likes are, who your favorite football team is, what college you went to, what year you graduated. All those things are available on social media, and then that crafted email will come to you with all this personalized information in it that reminds you that this is somebody you know. But in essence, we go back to the basic question, is it really someone you know? Did you really know who that was? Now, in some cases, they get really tricky, and they'll put in the header or an address that is someone you do know or a business you are dealing with. This is where you have to go on the offense. Did I really have something coming from them this week? Did I really have something available to me? And then start doing some of your own analytics. Look at the header of the email without opening the email. Don't hit on any links. You should never be giving up information just in an email. And there's another rule. If there's asking for information from you in an email and you don't trust it, pick up the phone and call the entity who sent it to you to validate that that's who it really is. And if it doesn't feel right, please don't do it. Next thing we want to look at is how do they do these kinds of things and where are they targeting the business emailed? One of the things that we've seen a lot of is the targeting of wire transfer or bank information or information about your account. Again, social engineering is tied to so many different passwords. Social engineering is tied to your date of birth, social information. These are things that with that information, I could either go open an account for you, or I could create an account, or I could change your account. So you have to be careful about what it is you post, where and how how you use it. Again, if somebody's calling you for information and says, I'd like to validate or verify this information on your behalf, double check. Don't give it right away. Delete the email. Don't go any further. I think there's one also where we have seen an individual's name of respect. Someone that we know that could be a judge or a lawyer or someone we look up to. Their name goes on the header of the email, and you immediately think, wow, this is great. I didn't realize this person was going to reach out to me and touch me and say something. Well, they're probably not. They probably are reaching out and touching your bank account or some other information that you don't want to give up. So again, the key becomes, how do I become offensive in the way I approach this as opposed to defensive? Email can be very dangerous. It can be your best friend. And there's a lot of email that travels around in a day. I know personally, I get somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 emails a day. You just have to train yourself to go on the offense and screen them. And if you don't know who it is and it's asking you information or it wants you to hit a link, don't do it. There are some of us that can actually get away with just saying, I'm not hitting any links. And you're pretty safe that way. There's other email attacks that are much more insidious. And I'll tell you, there's a rule in cybersecurity, which is there are those who have been had and there's who will be, and those who don't know they have been. So if you do get caught up into it and you do hit that link, we're going to talk a little bit more about what to do in that later. But the key is, don't panic. There's always a way to protect yourself, to make sure that things are going the way that you need them to go. It may not happen right away. There may be a loss in the interim, but don't give up. Don't let that bad agent have your way and have your money. I think next thing we want to talk about is the patience through reconnaissance, or what the FBI calls the 5 types of information that they have: bogus invoice, CEO fraud, account compromise, attorney impersonation, and data theft. So a lot of buzzwords, a lot of words that are very important, legal terms. Again, on the offense, if somebody uses a legal term against you, don't fall for it right away. Double check it. It's really interesting. Last week I'm sitting at home and I got a call from an agent of the Internal Revenue Service. And the agent said on a recorded line, information about your personal account has been given up and is being used against you. Please hold on this line for an agent to come along and work with you. And so I wait, and the individual comes up because I kind of like to see what new tricks they're playing. And this gentleman gets on the phone and tells me that he is an agent for the Federal Revenue Service, and that he's glad I held on the line waiting for me to correct my problem. So my first question to him was, well, oh, I'm sorry, what's my problem? Well, surely you should know by now. So if you give me your personal information, I'll help you fix it. I immediately said, gee, how long are you going to hold on this line for me to give it to you? And he hung up on me. I think what I'm getting to in the moral of the story, if you will, is that this is really about you protecting yourself, not on an offensive level, but I mean, not on a defensive level, but an offensive level. Really knowing what you want to do and what to protect. There's a rule in cybersecurity that says basically, know what's the most important thing you need to protect. The crown jewels. If those crown jewels are taken from you, your financials, your tax records, your personal identifier, where you store the key to the safe, if all of those things are online, I would be very cautious to put them in an area that the internet can have access to. One of the things I used to find very interesting in cybersecurity was that we personalize our electronic equipment. I've seen several people who name their cell phones, or even better, put their name on their cell phone. So if you're looking on a network indicator, you can tell whose cell phone that is and if they're active and what IP they're at and a lot of other personal information. So you're kind of just putting yourself out there. You're identifying yourself for those who may be targeting you, and you've just made it easier for them to find you. So again, I think the key becomes here, why be so blatantly obvious about who you are? If you gave your cell phone a strange name that nobody would know and you never admitted to it, who would care? You know who that is. I think it's the same thing with a computer. Sometimes what we do is we say, I've got this personal information that I want nobody to know, so I'm going to tell my computer. I'm going to put it on the computer, and I'm going to put it in an Excel spreadsheet. And that's where I'm going to keep all the records. But I don't lock it down, I don't hide it, I don't do anything. The problem with a computer is it's like your worst friend. You know, the friend that you tell all your personal secrets to and then they tell everyone else. Because a computer has no ability to discern between friend A or friend B and to trust them. If I or anyone enters into your computer and asks it a question, it will give them the answer that they have asked. So your personal information is available to them because they just asked to give me this information. So it doesn't think, it just responds, it reacts. If you hide information on here and you think I am so clever that I can hide this information on the computer and nobody will ever find it, they make this thing called root file, which is really funny. It actually lines everything out that you store on your computer, and you can very quickly go through that root file and find just about everything that's ever been written on there. And because you gave that file a really unique nickname, my credit card debt or my credit card numbers, that file is easily found and can be pulled off your computer. So again, not thinking, go on the offense and think, I'm not going to make this easy for anybody to find. Name it your dog's name. Name it the cat's name. But don't be so obvious that it's readily available and it's right there and can be had. So back to email for just a second. Really, two big kinds of email in the small business world that you have to be worried about. The first one is the phishing attacks. This is really a form of identity theft, and I've seen it occur on both sides of the fence, both that is the individual that is doing business with someone and the business itself, where the phishing attack comes in and says, hi, I'm Joe, I'm a disgruntled former customer of yours. These are the problems I had on these days. And you start responding to them and you're giving information out. And as soon as you give out the right kind of information, they're back into your system and they're looking for more information. Sensitive data. This goes back to the crown jewels. So the cyber term is sensitive data. The term you should look at is really the crown jewels of who you are and how your business runs. If you make beer and you have a secret formula for the beer, don't store it openly on the internet. I would really put it in a lock-in safe. Everything that you put on the internet is available to someone, some way, shape, or form if they come through your computer and screen it and take the information. Now, that doesn't mean they're all going to come after you. But if you have a hot commodity, you're making the newspaper, your sales are known to everybody, you're a target. And so that is something that will be of interest. And then with these phishing attacks where they start to ask you, hey, how's business? How was the receipts last week? Are you using that same old bank you used to use, or did you move to that new one? That's all the sensitive data. That's the crown jewels of how you do things. You got to think about not giving that out. Now, what's interesting is, this is where that sensitive data and identification kind of goes into social engineering. Again, I'll talk about that in a minute. But you really have to be aware of where you're at when you're talking about these sensitive data, crown jewel information, and who you give it to. My son has asked me sometimes, and he'll send an email, or better, it's a text, right? It's a text, Dad, what's the password to Netflix? And I just, without thinking, I put it in there and send it to him. Well, so I'm breaking my own rule because I'm not taking care of my information and I'm putting it in a media. But that's just how quickly these things occur that you have to think about it. And I'm trained at this and I know better, but I still respond to him that quick. And I justify it by thinking, oh, he'll never show that to anybody or nobody will see that. That's not the case. Once you put it out there, it's available. You can't pull it back. So again, when you realize that and you're on the offense, go change your password. Do something proactive so that you can make up for the accident that you just did. Spoofed emails. So there's this thing right now that where the phishing attacks look just like the real email that you got last week from Sony Corporation or RCA or someone that was sending you information. And you look it over and you say, I remember this last week, it's the same one, so it must be good. And you hit that hot link or you send a response to it with information in it. So again, if you didn't answer it the week before, why would you answer it now? You really have to think differently about responding to these things. Go back and think about when we got caller ID, the coolest thing was unknown caller. Do you answer those unknown callers? I wish we could do unknown emailer, right? So that I wouldn't have to answer all those emails. But again, the key becomes if I'm not expecting an email from that entity or that person, or this doesn't sound like something they would send, it's probably not. So be offensive about it, not defensive about it. All right, all this gets a little bit trickier when they start developing a fake website. And this is kind of hard to tell. It looks like the regular website you were at. It looks like the one you were at last week. The key becomes then you have to go into the header address and look at it. And does it say HTTPS? That's a good indicator. Now there are some really fancy ones that still have the HTTPS in there, and they're pretty tricky. However, you've got to start looking for these little indicators that tell you something's not normal here. So if you're doing an online presence, and you haven't locked down your website, there's a high probability somebody has made a copy of your website and they're sending traffic, not to you, but to them. And they're either getting just the social security number, and the order still goes through to you, but they're pulling that social security number off. Or they're just collecting the money and never shipping anything. How do you test that? Well, I'll tell you, back to offense. Every now and then, test your own websites. Check them out yourself. Order something from yourself. Send yourself a customer complaint and see what happens. Become offensive in the way that you approach how you deal with interacting with your customer base. If you sit back and pay somebody else to take care of your website, that's like letting somebody else take care of your car and drive it, and you say, hey, it's okay, I trust you, I'll pay for the gas and everything else, and then you get a ding. Whose fault is it? Well, it's not theirs, you let them do it. So you have to really test drive your own website on a periodic basis. If you don't have a support staff or you don't have IT staff and it's all you, double check it as many times as you can. Just get into that, I call it the OCD, it's OCD for cyber. Double check everything. Check the locks, check the website, check it's locked down. Just keep doing it. Make it part of your daily closure routine where you're looking at what you've got on your website and how you're interacting with it. So next I want to talk about spear phishing and targeted attacks. Phishing but targeted. This is where they know it's you and they are going to target the email at you. One of the biggest things that we worry about in cyber is giving out the entire organizational structure online. Now in customer service, you're taught that you should give everybody's name and who you call if something breaks. Phishing, spear phishing loves that. Because now I know exactly who to go to say something broke and your boss said to fix it. And I'm going to name the boss in that phishing attack. And I'm going to say, and he said, you said to fix it. Because I'm looking at your organizational chart and I know exactly how to get to you to get you to do something for me. We've seen this attack in a lot of instances where a corporation or an entity will receive a note that says, hey, I just committed $25,000 to this cause. Please write a check for this entity to that organization and we'll follow up the paperwork. That's a targeted spear phishing attack. It has names. It makes you feel like, hey, the boss just told me to do this thing. And you would not believe how many times that works, where people will send the money without contacting the boss first and saying, you know, this doesn't sound right, or, hey, we don't do anything without paper, you know, that's the way we do. But they'll send that money, and the money isn't recoverable. So you got to be on that offense, if you will, and really look. The potential of network compromise is a possibility where there is somebody riding on your network and looking at you. And if you're a small business and you're afraid that that has happened, there are several entities, local law enforcement, Office of Emergency Services at the state level, and others who can come to your assistance and help you out. We've got a handout that we can send out afterwards that might be able to help you, and some resources to look at if you feel like there's somebody else and your website is compromised. Again, check your website yourself. Find out, see what you can do to find out yourself. And then there's smaller corporations and companies that are doing cyber now. There's a sad element to cyber, which is the bigger companies cost more. They have a lot more capability. There are a lot more people to work with, and they solve a lot bigger problems, but they're very expensive. One of the large companies that did cyber remediation when they first started, which was about 10 to 15 years ago, they were averaging $600 an hour per employee they put on your problem. I think that's kind of leveled off because the skill set has become so much larger, but still, it's very expensive to have somebody come in and fix all of your problems for you. And do you really know if they are really ever completely fixed? Well, that's the problem with cyber. You don't really know. And so as a small business, what you really want to get used to doing is knowing what's on your website, where is it at, where do I store it, and why do I put it on that website? All right, this may sound really simple, maybe too simple. Change your passwords regularly. Now, I know that there are those of you out there who are reading the magazines, and you're going to tell me, wait a minute, the magazine, the article, the newspaper said, I don't have to change my passwords anymore, and they don't have to be 23, and all these other things. Changing a password is like the lock on your door at night. Why did you put the locks on the doors and the windows at your home? Because you get into this routine of closing that lock at night and securing it, and you feel better about what you've done. It's the same thing with a password. That password is your lock on your system. It's your lock on your email. It's your lock on your information. The same reason that you lock at night, every night, is to keep someone from coming through that door easily. That's what the password does. It keeps someone from coming into your information and taking it easily. If it's easy, they'll come in, they'll be gone before you know it. If they have to work at it, that bad actor has to make a decision. Do I spend the time? Is it worth the time I spend to get into your computer to get your information that I make a profit as a result of it? The password is that first place where that occurs. And yeah, there's all sorts of encryption and different ways to do that. I recommend you get a password container such as 1Password or LastPass or RoboForm. Use those things. They're worth their weight in gold for helping you create really complex passwords and ones you don't necessarily have to remember You just got to remember the one that you made to get into the account that you're using. And they'll also do searches. So they'll look for websites that have been compromised and tell you that this website is compromised and the password that you had on that compromised website hasn't been changed. So that's back to being offensive, not defensive, where you're looking for that kind of information, going in and changing it and protecting yourself. So again, there's all sorts of information on passwords. Biggest thing I would say is, number one, don't reuse the same password. I've talked to several people who are at the university, and then they go out into the real world and they carry a university account with them, and they use that for all their personal information, and they carry their password with them for years, 15, 20 years. That's bad. Any time in that time frame, that password could have been compromised. And if that's the only password you're using on all your accounts, guess how easy it is to get into your account, move your money, take things, open up, I'm going to take a boat loan. Those are the things you don't want to do. And that's, again, that's being defensive. I had a password. Offensive is I have a password, I change it, I don't use the same one. I'm being proactive about how I defend my cyber awareness. So passwords, a good one, a password is 8 to 64 characters. 64, can you remember that many? Not most of us can, particularly we have many of them. That's why a LastPass or a password manager system is so helpful. They have to have character types in them. Don't use full words like I like my computer or your address or your birth dates. Those are all crazy things. You know, there's a great, I think it's a Jimmy Fallon show where they go out on the street and they ask people, you know, do you have a password for a computer? And they say, yeah. And then they social engineer the person and they get the password out of them in that like 5-minute window, and they could enter into their computer. So don't make it something so personal that you accidentally give it away. Your dog's name, your cat's name. Another one that we've seen so many times, every one of you out there that has your password on a sticky underneath your mouse pad, tear it up tomorrow, change your password. Shame on you. But I know you're out there. I've seen it multiple times. Multi-factor authentication. So this is a real upper for the password world. Multi-factor authentication is having either a biometric or an app that allows a double check that this is in fact you. We've instituted at the university for 100% utilization. Faculty, staff, and students are using multi-factor authentication. The key here is that if I do take an email in and I fall for the phishing and it says immediately, this is Microsoft, go to your account and change your account, use this link to go there, and you do that, multi-factor will catch it. And even though you used your password in there, it will not let you enter into the account without multi-factor, which means too many times you do it, your password gets shut off and you have to change your password, but nobody else can get into your account because of the multi-factor. So I highly recommend, if you're a small business and you're in the management and you have access to the sensitive information, crown jewels, multi-factor is the way that you want to get access to them. So tips for small businesses. This is directly for you all now. We've talked about a lot of those first things are really what I would do in the personal side as well as from the business side. But in this one, number one, train your employees on what you expect and what you want them to do and behave in a cyber-aware situation. Now, at the university, we have security training. So anybody who uses a state system has to go through authorized training. Sometimes that can be boring, it can be dull, and it's once a year, so you really don't remember it. Challenge yourself in a small business to make it something that's kind of fun, game-oriented, and is challenging. There are many programs such as Fish Me. This is where you actually pay someone and they fish your community and teach you, oops, you shouldn't have hit that. I don't know if that works or not, because the whole aspect of the gullibility of hitting a phishing attack is really that defense. I'm going to catch it. Again, going on the offense changes that dynamic. I'm not going to even open that because I don't know who it is. So train your employees how you want them to act. Train them how you want to ensure that credit cards are protected, that the crown jewels are known, they know where they're at, why they're there, and not necessarily how to get to them all the time. Limit the number of people who have complete access to the crown jewels. Protect information, computers, networks from cyber attacks. So simple things to do for a small business. Unplug at night. If you're not wanting to do updates and you're not worried about transactions overnight, unplug them. The only time the internet can get to you is when you're plugged into it with power. So unplug them at night. Yep, you'll have to wait in the morning for the upgrade or the update to take place, and it'll kick in and it'll slow you down. So go in 20 minutes early in the morning. It's worth it. The other thing is firewalls. Some people are afraid of the firewalls because they look really techy. Some firewalls are really, really simple and should be set just because, again, your goal is to slow down access to your computer and information. So set them, use them. If you feel good enough, if you've got the tech sense to set up a pretty elaborate firewall, go for it. If you want to pay someone to come in and help you set it up, do the same thing. It is another stop. It's like a speed bump on the road. If you're going 50 and hit a speed bump, you know it. In the computer cyber attack, if they hit that speed bump, they have to think about the time they're losing, that they could go somewhere else and more quickly get the information they really want. Mobile device action plan. So mobile has become the way of the world. Everything we do has a mobile connectivity. And Android and Apple, everybody says one is better than the other with the security aspects. There's different architectures and infrastructure to how those both work and how they're operated. That's getting technical. Make it simple on yourself. If you're using an app and it's not MFA associated, multi-factor associated, you've got an open door for a problem. Check the app. Check on who uses it. Talk to a cyber company. Call the Cyber Institute. Do your research. Again, be offensive in looking for what fits your business and yet protects you at the same time. There used to be a philosophy in cybersecurity that was called the no service is secure. In other words, the cyber guy was always saying no. Well, I want to do this. No. I want to add this mobile app. No. That world has changed because you can't do business. You can't do transactions if the word is always no. So the key becomes, how do you create a system of defense around these apps? How do you know when it's being used properly? How do you know when the app is current? And that's another element. I know Apple is a good example where they put out all these patches, and some people just say, well, I'll patch it when I get a chance, or Windows patch. Do the patch immediately. Those patches have security patches in it. That's an open knowledge of something that a backdoor or someone can break into. That patch is to fix that. Fix it. Don't keep yourself open for some kind of attack. The other element is if you're using a mobile strategy for all your action, double check it. Make sure it's working the way it's supposed to, and guard the number of units that you're using. One of the things we've seen is walk-off units. Somebody lost one. Well, it wasn't lost. It's being used on the side. So double checking, being offensive again in how you look at all your actions. Wi-Fi. So open Wi-Fi. Even if you've got a guest Wi-Fi that's open, put a password on it. There's no reason you want anybody off the street to walk in and use your Wi-Fi free. You're paying for it. Why give it away free? And if it's just, pardon me, attached to a password, give the Wi-Fi out and change the Wi-Fi password on a regular basis. Credit cards. That's an area where there's a lot going on there. PCI compliance is really big. How you hold the card, all that. You can get a lot of trouble on the credit cards because of the PCI compliance and not controlling that. Remember, once you put it into the Wi-Fi and put it into the air, unless that thing is protected at both ends, it's open for a potential issue. So in that, when you do business with a PCI compliant or a credit card company, ask, is your system encrypted at both ends? Where's the protection? And most important question is, if there's a problem, who's at risk and who's at fault? Protect yourself. So I guess the last one on this, and I think you've heard it already before, is the word passwords and authentications. In a small business, the password is your basic protection to everything. You can get really fancy. You can hire a cyber company. You can bring in all this cool technical equipment. That's really expensive. The cheapest thing that you have to control are those passwords, multi-factor authentication, and access authentications. So keep that as your primary focus on how you offensively control what's going on in your system. About last March, the world we work in changed significantly, where they said, don't come to work. They said, stay home. That was pretty uncomfortable. I don't know about you all, but I've got 20 plus years of being in an office and working there at the office and doing everything in the office, and then all of a sudden it's work at home. That created an unusual response, which we're beginning to see kind of a unique backlash, which is, hey, working from home's not so bad. And with modern fiber technology to the house, I can get done most of the work that I need to do here. And sometimes it's actually more efficient and more effective. But it also opens the door up for the conversation around the cybersecurity of working remotely or working from home. What are the best practices? What's the way to protect myself? Those sorts of things. And again, now this really boils down to the individual. The individual is responsible for their home environment. Unless your job put your remote terminal in your house, which didn't really happen a lot of places, it's on you to protect your work now, yourself, everything that goes on. So there's a couple of things you should really focus on and pay attention to, and that's really that you can't protect everything. You have to pick and choose, and if you're doing work from home, your work at home is critical to get right. So you want to use some things like changing passwords. You want to use a virtual private network, VPN, and VPN to your office. What that VPN does is it creates a tunnel that you work in. So all the things that you're doing for work go directly from your keyboard to the tunnel and come out the other end at work. And no one else is going to pick it off the internet and pull it and look at what you're doing. So it's a protection for you and for your work. And it's not very expensive, and most works have provided you a VPN to work with. It's just a pain in the butt to use, or it slows down my internet. Well, not really. If it's a good VPN and you've got good fiber connectivity, it's not going to slow it down. It may look like it, but remember, you're adding encryption and you're adding protection on top of it. So maybe that few milliseconds of time that it slows you down is enough to really protect you the way you should be. So the VPN is your friend. Don't look at it as another tech thing I got to deal with. It's actually a really good aspect. The other thing when working from home, we have a tendency to get very comfortable and leave stuff out. So if you have people come through the house, you have your kids, and they see the information, your passwords, whatever, again, you just don't have control of it. So you really do have to be aware of your surroundings. What are you using your machines for? What are you doing? Many people have multiple machines. They have their home machine, they have their work machine, they have an iPad, they have an iPhone, all those things, or Chromebook, all in the same area. And you find yourself doing all the work across all 4 or 5 different media. I would strongly recommend don't do that. Stick to the machine that you have for work. Do your work on your work machine. Do your home on your home machine. Keep those things separate. Put your VPN for work on there. Put your private VPN on your other one. They can go across the same internet, but with the VPN, it's a tunnel, so you've connected them directly to who you want to have the information. So even if it's on your own network that you're going out on, the VPN will protect that information as it goes across. Wireless network, we talked about a little earlier about passwords and such. So think about it. How many people protect their own Wi-Fi network with a password, or keep the same system administrator password that it came with, password, or admin? You got to change that up. It's very capable. It's very easy for someone to pull in your front yard and start searching the internet and find your internet. And oh, by the way, if you name your internet like you named your personal phone or computer, and you put your address on it, or even better, you put your last name and address, you're giving out personal information. You're making it easier for someone to figure out who you are, and I can get to your IP address. Getting to your IP address opens the door for possible attacks, different ways we can come in, everything from phishing to brute force attacks on your system and network. One of the things we didn't talk about, but really important in the home work environment, is denial of service. Denial of service is when your internet doesn't let you connect and you can't do work. So what we normally do when we do that is we get really frustrated and we start taking off all the security procedures, the firewall, take it off, turn off the VPN, it's working now. That's the perfect targeting. That's how you make people reduce their security posture and do that. And it's a form of attack. It's a social engineering attack as well as a physical attack on your home network, on your system, and on your protective nature. The things that you have done to be proactive in protecting your information. So again, it's really about understanding the environment you're in. If you have bad cable service, then doing work from home is going to be a toughie. Adding security postures on top of it is just going to make it harder to do. So you have to think about the impact of that. Upgrading your fiber, upgrading your cable, using a different methodology, maybe 5G if you're in different areas. These are all things you have to take into account. I think one of the biggest things to keep in mind in the home network, if you live by the adage, the simpler it is to use, the more I'm going to use it for homework, for the work from home environment, the worse it is secure. The easier it is means the security protocols have probably been reduced so that you can get in, get out, get what you want, and move on. That's a good philosophy to execute. You want to make sure that the security protocols are in place and being used to protect what you're doing. The VPN, the passwords, changing your information. And then with work, if you've got a full staff or you've got an IT staff, have them check out your system. Have them read the backlog, read the logs associated with your system. Send it to them and say, hey, is everything going on right on my computer? Because this is my work computer, and they can check it for you. So the other one I want to talk about, which is in the home environment, is at work, you're probably connected to the work log or the work network, and they're doing upgrades, patches, fixes automatically on your network. When you go home, they may not be done anymore because they can't come across the open internet. Now, they might come across in a VPN situation where they're going to push them through the VPN to you. But most of the time, you're on your own for the patches. So you have to go into your network, into your work, make sure there's a patch available and do the patches. If you've been last March to now and you haven't patched your networks or patched your computer, you got some major security issues that are out there. This last year was full of differing attacks on the elements of the computer that are weaknesses. So patching fixes those. If you haven't patched, you still have those weaknesses in your system, and that makes you an easier target. Again, remember, the bad actor is looking for the fastest way in to take information out of your system. Something that's not patched is a backdoor that now not only the person that found it knows it, but everybody else knows that backdoor is available. And if you haven't patched, it's wide open to all of them. I think there's one other last thing, and it just sounds so simple and silly, but don't let somebody else use your work computer to do their homework, to do something else on, because they may accidentally offset, turn off something, reset something that you don't know about, that now your system's not secure or protected because it accidentally or on purposely turned off something that precluded Netflix from coming in, or something else on your computer that was set up there by your work to prevent information from leaving your computer. If you think that's happened, go to your computer, go to your IT staff, and if it's you again, restart, reset your computer, set up your protocols. The thing to do that you might want to think about is if you're doing your own tech work, Write down what you're doing on a separate piece of paper and store it in your files. What security profiles and posture did you put on your computer that you can go back and replicate, or say this is what went wrong, and check against the patches. Patches are really well advertised once they're put out there so that you can see what created all these problem sets. And if you're doing your own tech support for your work, you can actually go see what those are, or find somebody that's really good at it and let them help you. But make sure they're trusted, because sometimes, again, bad actors pretend to be repair companies, and they're opening all sorts of back doors on you. So that's not to say that that's everybody in the business, but it's really about beware of what you're doing. If you don't know these people and you take your computer to them first time ever, does that really make sense? Would you buy a house from someone you didn't know without seeing the house? That's kind of the same context about the repair for your computer. Make sure you understand who you're dealing with. They're reputable. Other people have had their equipment fixed there, those kinds of things, before you just go do that. You know, the interesting part of being in the small business is really on you to figure out how to protect yourself. There's different agencies and others that you can go to help you out, but really what it comes down to is it's on you if something goes bad. What I see a lot of happening is then people really panic. They just, oh my God, the world is coming to an end. My information is out there. And the first thing they do is they turn off the computer and they reset it and they actually restart the whole thing. The problem with all that is, if there's somebody bad in your computer or it gotten information out and you restart it, or you redo your disk and you reapply the image, you're just making it worse, because now you have no control on what's in the logs or the information of what's gone on. So really, they just got away with it and you enabled them. The biggest thing to remember is if you think that you've been attacked or information has been taken, is think about the series of events that led up to that time. Either the emails, the phishing, something suspect. Try to write all that down so that if you do get someone to help you, you've got it written down that you can explain to them, well, this is when this all started. I've been in a couple cases where people will try to go from memory of what happened on their personal computer or the event, and the story changes every time they tell it. So writing it down so that you can trace what happened is really important. The other part is when you use credit cards, personally, online, I strongly recommend that you think about what you're doing, and also when banking. Check out your bank, check out your credit card. Go with entities that have a protection built into how they do business with you when you use their services. Transactions like moving money and other things should always have either a multi-factor or double checks or triple checks before the money is moved, so that you know that someone can't falsely call in and move your money somewhere else. Use a credit card that calls you every time you use it for an online transaction. That may be a pain, but I'll tell you what, you know the transaction is going where you thought it was, and if somebody else gets your numbers and starts using it, they call you and you can stop it. So really it's about, again, going on the offense to make sure that you're controlling what happens around your computer, your digital environment, and you're not just waiting for someone to call you and say, oops, we think your information has been stolen, or worse, you have no money in your bank account because it's all been moved. So I think that's a lot of information for all of you to really digest today. If you've got questions, we'll leave some contact information for you. The biggest key is don't think it's all you by yourself. You don't have to do this alone. You don't have to become a tech expert to become an expert at protecting yourself. This is much like, and I try to use the adage, it's like being a consumer. As a consumer, you don't go out and buy the coolest product and think, oh, this is going to last 50 years. This is only going to last a month or something. I mean, you really want to do your research before you buy it. If you go in and you tell a car dealership, I want this color car, and that's all you say, are you really practicing consumerism? No. Using a computer and doing business in the computer world is the same thing. Practice being a consumer. Practice protecting yourself. Be offensive in how you do it. I'm Bill Britton. I thank you a lot and look forward to interacting with you.